Good morning, Wahome. We are coming to you live, of course, from Mombasa, where at the Pride Inn Hotel, where today the International Justice Mission is holding its inaugural conference to address the matters sex trafficking, particularly in counties Mombasa, Kwale, and Kilifi. And according to their report, it's that by 2019, it is estimated that over 20,000 girls and boys have been victims of various forms of sexual violence here at the coastal region. Now today, of course, they are joined by some of the victims that have experienced some of this kind of ills in the society, and he's going to give joined by the manager, who's going to give us more information what exactly they are hoping to achieve from this inaugural conference. I understand this is the first of its kind, and they're going to do many of this. Will the sensitization or such a conference yield fruits? That is what we want to find out today. Welcome, Bwana Agri Juma. Today, tell us, according to these statistics that I've just devoured earlier on, is this true, and what are you doing as the International Justice Mission to address this particular issue?
Thank you. Indeed, this is true. We have seen high prevalence of issues of child sex trafficking here in the coast, which have informed two things. One, it has informed our work here in the coast. We set up an office early this year just to address these cases in this region. And two, we also saw the need for us to convene this conference in order to bring together stakeholders so that we can discuss the problem in depth, to get a better understanding of the problem of child sex trafficking in depth. Secondly, for us to identify some solutions for this problem. And thirdly, to prioritize on what we need to do urgently for us to address this issue of child sex trafficking here in the coast.
What are the numbers looking like? I've mentioned 20, but do you have individual statistics perhaps of this particular counties?
Indeed, the 20,000 was informed by our initial assessment, which informed our coming. And these 20,000 are not just children who have been maybe sexually abused. But in addition to being abused, they were abused in an environment that allowed for their trafficking. And this would mean that somebody was paying a child or paying another adult to engage in sexual activity with a child. It would also mean that somebody conveyed a child, transported a child from one place to another for them to be sexually exploited for a level of gain. It would also mean that somebody was giving something of value to this child or to someone around this child for them to be able to be exploited sexually. When you speak about sexual violence against children generally, the numbers are even higher. And then when you look at the numbers that are being reported, or the ones that have been identified through research, they're actually lower because there are so many other cases that are taking place. But since there's an environment that is allowing an environment of agreement between the perpetrator and the survivors and the victims, then it becomes very hard for these cases to be reported, and that has limited our detection of some of these crimes when they take place.
I understand, as we have covered such cases previously, the issue of persecution, successful persecution of these particular cases has also been an issue. Has your organization been able to file successful story to completion with the courts?
Because of the short duration of time within which we've been here, we've not gotten to the point of conviction yet. But we have a number of cases that are running through the system and which we are hoping will act as models for a successful prosecution of some of these cases. I'll note that in a lot of cases that are coming to court, they come in as defilement, which is okay because the Sexual Offences Act is very well placed to prosecute cases in which the child has been violated. But in addition to the person who actually defiles a child, in a trafficking context, there are those who are called facilitators. And so we have people who are facilitating the abuse of children sexually, and our project is trying to ensure that even those are addressed, because if we only deal with the perpetrator and we forget the facilitator, then the facilitator will always organize another situation in which another child or that very same child is abused. And so we are trying to ensure that every person who is involved in this chain of abuse of a child is brought to book. And one of the things we are doing with the government agents in successful prosecution is to conduct capacity building and training for ODPP, capacity building for a level of improving the capacity on trauma-informed care for some of the judicial officers, as well as the law enforcement officers involved in this space, because that is key to ensure that they understand what they're doing and they're doing it effectively.
The vibrancy of tourism here at the coastal region can go, I assume, is the leading factor of such cases. How do you go about it? Because the COVID pandemic hit and people are desperate for jobs, and maybe this is the shorter route out. How do you start from there? Because we still need our tourism, and as well we need the innocence of our children.
And before even you get to tourism, I think we have a culture, and by culture I don't mean broadly some traditional cultures of some other tribes, but generally there's practices out here in the coast that have allowed for children to be violated. And what that means then is that there is a supply environment for children to be abused sexually, and therefore when the tourists come, both domestic and international, they find a situation in which there's a lot of opportunity to engage in sexual activity with children, which then compounds the problem, because what tourists do is that they bring money into the abuse of children, and once you bring money into something like that, the interests increase, and so it adds to it. But I think the root causes are the enabling environment, because we have a situation in which there's a lot of sexual violence against children, including incest, which is very close home for the child. And so in such an environment, it becomes very easy for someone to see the abuse of a child for money as a benefit rather than what it is. It's a vice that should be addressed for what it is. And so tourism just compounds the issue and puts us in a situation where we now have to deal with so many other issues beyond the initial crime that must have taken.
So finally, we know all these contributing factors as an organization. I am sure there are parents involved in this particular stakeholder engagement. Yes. What are some of the strides that you're making as we wind up?
In terms of the strides that we've made, I think
changing the perception of this particular vice.
Yes, we've done a lot of community engagement. As we speak, we have a talk show in one of the local radio stations, just to try and ensure that the masses are made aware of the issues. We also have done a lot of community dialogues, child protection committee strengthening, court users committee, supporting their work around protecting children. We've also involved beacon teachers. We've involved parents of survivors and survivors themselves in trying to ensure that they understand the ills, and also they're responding to them as is appropriate to ensure that it is sustainable. But a lot of community engagement and sensitization has gone into play in the last 11 months or so.
Let me just engage one of course, he's a parent, I understand, to one of the survivors. What happened, and is it true that parents play a big role, or the society is playing a big role in this particular trial?
Oh yes, thank you. First of all, just allow
your
me
name?
To speak in
It's okay.
So
Haina name.
Can understand what I'm
Haina tatizo.
Okay, I'm just Fatumanisha. Natoka Likoni, Mombasa. Haya masuala ambayo tunazungumzia kwa sasa ni masuala ambayo yana kizungumkuti, na lazima tushirikiane wote ili tupate kupigana nayo kuyamaliza.
Ni kweli wazazi mumelaumiwa kwamba mnatengeneza mazingira ambayo yanafanya mtoto yule ajihusishe na mambo kama haya, na kama mzazi mweza fanya vipi? Kwa sababu ya muda mweza fanya lipi ili kuondoa maneno kama haya kwenye jamii?
Okay, si wazazi wote. Unajua tunapotumia neno wazazi tunajumuisha. Tuna wale ambao inasababisha kweli, lakini haswa sana cha msingi ni kwamba kila mzazi mahali alipo anastahili ainuke na alinde mtoto wake. Anapolinda mtoto wake, majanga hayatampata, na haswa sana kama hatampata, asiwe mtu wa kumalizia haya masuala ndani ya nyumba. Yani ajitokeze na ayashtumu na ayafikishe katika vyombo vya usalama. Hiyo ndiyo itakuwa njia muhimu ya kipekee ambayo tunaweza pigana na haya masuala.
Ukiangalia wale ambao pengine wamedhalilishwa, kuongea imekuwa vigumu kwa hasa watoto, manake ukiangalia pengine mwenye amekunajisi pengine ni mtu ambaye unamfahamu na ni mtu aliye karibu nawe, pengine ungewaambiaje wazazi ili kuona kwamba yule ambaye anadhalilishwa kwenye jamii anaweza kuongea na kuenda kupeleka kwa vyombo vya usalama ili kuona kwamba haki imeweza kutendeka?
Kweli hili swala ni ngumu, kwa sababu unapoangalia ni kama mtu ambaye ni mtoto mdogo, ama ni mtu ambaye kile kitendo chenye amefanyiwa ni cha kushtua akili zake. Unapata kama mzazi, kwanza ni vigumu sana kuishi na huyo mtoto, mpaka pia wewe uapply maisha mapya ya kwa ajili ya kutaka kuishi na huyo mtoto, kwa sababu kila dakika anapokaa anafikiria yale masuala, anakuja anafikiria wazazi wanafikiria vipi kunihusu mimi. Anapoona wewe mzazi, kwanza unapata yule mtoto atakuwa ni mtu wa kustuka kila dakika, ni mtoto alikuwa ni mtoto mcheshi, anakaa peke yake. Kwa hivyo ni vizuri haya masuala yanapotokea, ni lazima hata wewe usome kuishi nayo na ujitokeze, upeleke kwa vyombo vya usalama na utafute washauri, manake ni kitu inaweza enda ikadhiri hata mtoto kiakili usipotafuta washauri mapema ili wapate kumsungumuzia, manake pia wewe peke yako hautaweza, ni vigumu kwa kukaa mzazi.
Tukimalizia, ungerai wazazi nini katika ngoma hii na vita hivyo?
Mimi kwangu ni kupigana, kila mtu awe mzazi, awe mtoto mwenyewe, awe mtu yoyote yule ambaye bado ako chini ya jua na anapumua, tupigane na haya masuala. Sio mzazi tu peke yake, kila mtu ambaye ako chini ya jua, kwa sababu sisi ndio tunayatenda na hao vijana ndio wanayatenda. Kwa hivyo ni vizuri hao wazazi, unapopata hili swala, kimbiza tu polisi, tafuta polisi penye wako, ifike kotini, usikubali yamaliziwe pale chini. Hapo ndio itakuwa ni msingi na kumalizana na haya masuala.
That is one of the parents to one of the survivors who are convening here at the Pride Inn Hotel under the International Justice Mission just to address matters sex trafficking, especially in minors. And now they're saying that they're projecting from the initial report that from 2019 over 20,000 people have fallen prey to the vice of sex trafficking in counties of Mombasa, Kwale and Kilifi. The root of the problem, according to the experts, they say it is about the society. They are providing an enabling environment for these people, for these minors to be defiled. So a change in perception could go a long way in lowering such numbers. We will, of course, give you an update at the top of the hour on this developing story, but I hand it back to you, Daniel Wahome, in studio.